cognitive behavioral therapy of saying to yourself, everybody forgets stuff sometimes at every age. That's not a big deal. It is not the beginning of the end. Reforming how we talk to ourselves, because this thing of like, I can't get old is toxic. And so the question is not how not to age. The question is how to age with vitality, with intellectual curiosity, with humility and love and hope. Because how not to age, you are going to age.
Welcome to Longevity by Design, a podcast designed to give individuals access to the leading scientific information in the field of longevity. The ability to add years to your life and life to your years needs no opinion. Join us as we ask science to take the wheel. In each episode, Dr. Gil Blander joins a co-host and an industry expert in the field of longevity, shining a light and getting the answers to the key question: how can we live a longer, healthier life?
Hello, I'm Dr. Gil Blander. Welcome to Longevity by Design, how to live a longer, healthier life. We are produced by InstaTracker, your science-based guide to optimize your body from the inside out. Our guest today is Dr. Kerry Burnight. Kerry is a true pioneer in the field of gerontology and healthy aging. She earned her PhD in gerontology from the University of Southern California and spent over 2 decades as a professor of geriatric medicine and gerontology at the University of California, Irvine. Dr. Burnight is the founder of the nation's first elder abuse forensic center and has served as the chief gerontologist for the Grant TED, designing accessible technology for older adults. She advised leaders in healthcare, government, and aging policy, and she has dedicated her career to improving the quality of life for older adults. Most recently, she is the author of Joyspan, The Art and Science of Thriving in Life's Second Half. Her book blends decades of professional expertise with deeply human stories, showing how joy is not only feeling, but a design principle for longer, healthier life. Welcome, Kerry.
Thank you, Dr. Blander. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, and I'm very excited for our discussion. But before we start the discussion, I would like to encourage our audience, if you are enjoying Longevity by Design, please like and follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, so you don't miss any future episode. And with that, again, welcome, Kerry. I'm really excited about the discussion. And as I told you pre-recording, I bought the book, and a colleague of mine actually paid my attention for your book, and he said something so refreshing. Instead of looking at the negative, someone is looking of how can we enjoy the elder part of our life. So I said that I have to buy it, and I started to look at it, and so far it's very exciting. So I have a lot of questions to ask you, but before we dive into the book, I want to just have a glimpse of your background. And you spent decades working with older adults as a gerontologist. Can you please describe your journey there?
Yes, I feel like I was born a gerontologist because I was the surprise last child to my parents, and they had high school students. And then this crazy surprise in my mom's 40s of a last child. So when I was born, my dad already had gray hair. And I think I went through life as a young person when people would speak poorly about old people, which happens almost every day. It felt a little personal. And I was often saying, no, older people can do this. I didn't know then, but after my college studies, when I learned that there was a field called gerontology that was designed to look at the physiological, biological, social, psychological, economic impact of growing older, I've just felt delighted in that I was meant to do that. And so it's been 30 years, and I feel like being a gerontologist is the best job out there.
Excellent. And we need many more like you. A follow-up question. Can you define what is gerontology for our audience? What does it mean?
Great question. Gerontology is the study of aging. And so we're looking at this process from every vantage point. And sometimes people don't differentiate a gerontologist from a geriatrician. So a geriatrician is somebody who, like a pediatrician, is a practitioner who has an MD, whereas gerontology is from all vantage points and is a PhD.
Excellent. That's good to know. And I assume that it's a bit confusing, so it's good for our audience to know. And continuing with your background, you work at the intersection of healthcare, aging, and society for many years. How has your view of aging evolved through that work?
I had the dubious distinction of being one of the youngest gerontologists in the nation way back 30 years ago. And what has really changed is when I started into it, I thought about older people as other, right? And now as I've grown older, you understand it's not other people, it is us, and that every single one of us is aging. And if we're lucky, we will get to grow old. My early work was all with the most devastating, heartbreaking, discouraging, almost poison to my eyes of what I saw every day in my practice. So we created an elder abuse forensic center, meaning applying science to the law of people who had endured financial exploitation or physical abuse or neglect or self-neglect. And I worked many years in trying to remediate these cases of people suffering so much. And it was rewarding. But what really was a big turning point in this mission was the fact that it's too late. If we're just waiting till the end, till people are old, till people are in their 80s and 90s and have suffered, we need to get way back. And I love that's the work that you do as well, which is how can we early on in life fortify ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally, so that we can be one of those people who thrives in longevity rather than languishes and suffers.
No, that's a great. You need to prepare to aging like you prepare for retirement. So it's like 401k. You need to
Yes.
prepare with. And I know my daughter is 20, and I told her she has some money in the side. I told her, yeah, invest it in the S&P 500, and in 50 or 60 years when you're retired, it will be a lot of money.
That's right.
It's the same here. When you are young, yeah, work on your body, make it better, and make it ready for being elderly. And I couldn't agree with you more about the fact that all of us will be old. So nobody will, unless there will be a miracle that it's very unlikely.
Or if you die young, that's the other way to do it.
Yeah, correct. But I'm sure that, let's say 99% of us don't want to die young. You need to get ready for that. And another observation from my side, I remember when I was in my 20s, I said, oh, 30s are old. And then when I was 30, I said, oh, 40s are old. And now I'm in my 50s and I'm saying, oh, maybe 60, maybe not, maybe. So what I'm trying to say, and it's going back to what you're saying, we need to provide a lot of respect to the elderly, because they survived to that age and they have been as young as we are, and definitely they've done a lot to get to that old age. Definitely we need to treat them better, and hopefully we are doing that. In that line, many people think that aging is as a decline. What is your counter narrative for that?
Yes. So the most common outlook is what I call the decline aging mindset. And wonderfully, that spells the acronym DAM. So the DAM mindset is that everything gets worse as you get older, less relevant, less interesting, less attractive, and the reason that we have this mindset is because it is so lucrative. There's this billion-dollar anti-aging industry and narrative that tells us it is awful and you must fight it and deny it and fear it, and that you can't let it happen. And the irony is this is not supported in the literature. The research shows that there are many things that get better as you get older, and that the experience of being older is way more positive than people think it will be when they're younger. And so we have fallen for this sort of trap. And the reason that it's so dangerous to carry this decline, aging mindset is because what you expect impacts the choices you make. So people who say, aging sucks, it's going to be all decline, I'm going to not be able to do this, this, and this, you're generally predicting how it will be. In fact, research out of Yale shows that people with negative age beliefs die on average 7.5 years before those who endorse positive age beliefs, holding constant all the other variables. So what we think matters, and looking at the research of what gets better as you get older, which is not very publicized, the first is that we don't care as much what other people think, and that can be very liberating. We have a much better ability to regulate our emotions, so we don't fall to pieces if something doesn't go right. We're able to. We have often improved problem-solving abilities as a result not only of neurological integration of our left and right hemisphere, but also just based on experience, that we can draw upon a lot of experience. I have a great story that goes with that. And we have greater potential for appreciation of our friendships, our appreciation of beauty and music and art, and the potential for deepening spirituality, a greater humility. And if we as a society could recognize what older us brings, it's what societies need. So if it's the opposite, we need to really lean into these strengths if we're going to right the course of many of these societal ills.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely like that. And anyway, the society is becoming older and older. I just read an article yesterday that in Japan, there are almost 100,000 centenarians. In a country of 100 million, roughly, they have already 100,000 centenarians, which is amazing. And hopefully in the US, we'll have that also soon. We are going that direction. Let's endorse them. Let's use their experience. They have so much experience. They've seen so much. Some of them have seen the pandemic that happened in the early 20th century. So they can give us a lot of value from their experience.
Yes, and we are them. So there really is no othering or them. It
Absolutely.
is us, absolutely. And every day in the United States, 10,000 more Americans are turning 75. And that is so many of us, right? And if, like we said, if we could harness those strengths and stop with this whole notion that somehow we have to not age or hide our age, or that somehow we're going to avoid death. I mean, I think sometimes people haven't really thought through their longevity plan, because if it is simply to live longer, what about the quality of that long life? A long life, even a long life in good health, doesn't mean much if you don't like the quality of your life. So I think this conversation about what does well-being mean and how can we harness what it takes in order to like our life all the way to 105 years old.
Or even longer. The longer person live to 122, so maybe we can reach that. That's my goal, to at least get to 122. I don't know if I can do it, but you provide an excellent introduction. I couldn't find a better introduction for my next question, and that's what exactly Joyspan, and how does it differ from Lifespan and Healthspan?
Yes, I love that. So as a gerontologist, we have long talked about lifespan, how many years a person lives or how long a species can live. More recently, we have added health span, how long you can live in good health. And that matters because we want a health span as long as our lifespan. And much of it has focused on the physical parts, which is important. And those components of the physical are our aerobic abilities, our cardiovascular, our flexibility, our strength, and our agility. I have patients who are living a long life. They are in great health, but they're miserable. And that's the part that I thought, this is not okay. So I needed to think about, well, what about this quality? What would be a vocabulary that we can use? I selected the word joy, not because it's ecstasy or toxic positivity or smiling all the time. No, the American Psychological Association defines joy as well-being and satisfaction. So you could think of it as well-being span, but it's not very catchy. So joy is different than happiness because happiness often comes and goes and is circumstantially dependent. Joy is a much more inside out, and therefore joy can be cultivated and even maintained when circumstances are hard. And as we live long lives, there are hard circumstances. And I think putting our head in the sand and saying, I'm simply going to be perfectly healthy and be able to maintain everything, and my spouse will never die and my kids will never have problems, I think that is causing more suffering than opening our eyes of saying, yeah, with these long lives, there are things that we didn't wish for, but how we handle them and how we're able to maintain our joy anyway makes a big difference in life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And life is not black and white. You have a lot of gray in between, and we need to deal with it and make a lot of sense. So can you share with our audience some of the science that link joy, purpose, and longevity?
Yes. So in reviewing thousands of studies of why some people thrive in longevity and some people do not, there were thousands of variables. And when you have thousands of variables, you can't work on them all because there are simply too many. So a big part of this research that I spent years upon is trying to really understand the science of how these variables group and the science of why people who do these, and what we found was amazing. People who thrive in longevity consistently do 4 things. And the 4 things are all verbs because they all take action and decision. It's not just luck and it's not just genes. In fact, genes play less than 25% of a predictive role in this. So the big thing is actually not genes or luck. So the 4 biggies it starts with a G and it ends with a G. And in the middle, it's CA, which you might remember. I'm from California, so maybe I tried to make an acronym that would be handy, but I couldn't seem to force it. I needed to use the words that the science showed me. So the first is people who thrive in longevity are those that decide to continue to grow. So we see people who are setting new goals, new things to learn, and it could be in any area. The growth could be what we think of as, maybe learning something new, like a new language, but it's also, I had some patients who they decided, I have never been known as somebody who is a listener. I would love to be a person who is remembered as a listener. And they would work on what it would take for me to really be tuned in and to listen to the people around me. So the kind of growth is very varied. And in the book, we get into how to dig into your curiosity to find areas of growth. What it isn't healthy and doesn't result in long joy span is that notion that I've worked hard all my life to continue to grow, and now that I'm older, I'm just going to take my foot off the gas, not learn anything new. I've done it. This does not result in good outcomes. And so in thinking about, for example, retirement, it's not in any way that I'm against retirement, but the question is, what is that next step going to look like? And how can we craft for the next 30 or 40 years something that's going to continue to stimulate me that I'm interested in? So the first is grow. The second is connect. There's an overwhelming research on those who have meaningful connections in their life age very differently than those who don't. And I think we all know by now that loneliness, as defined by wanting more social interaction than you currently have, is as dangerous to your health as smoking 14 cigarettes a day. The problem here is that if you just let your friendships go on autopilot, you outlive your friends, or your friends get cognitive impairment or move away or whatever. So the people who thrive in longevity are the ones who are that friend. And you know that friend. It's the friend who makes the plans, who reaches out, who brings you soup when you're sick, who says, hasn't it been 5 years since your mom passed away? Let's go to dinner and talk about her. Can I drive you to chemo? Tell me about your kid who's now in graduate school. I want to learn more about that. You need to be really quite proactive, which sometimes for some of us means getting out of our comfort zone.
I have a couple of questions, if it's okay.
Sure.
Yeah. So the first one related to retirement, and I couldn't agree with you more. And I have an example. My father is now 94 and he retired at the age of 89 because of COVID. So he couldn't go to work. So it's like, okay, I'm retiring. So my question to you is it better to continue to work as long as possible, or is better at the age of 65, 67, whatever, to go and retire and go and have an hobby? What is your viewpoint on that?
It is very specific to the person. So for some of my patients, continuing to work into their 90s fills their soul, connects them with others, that, they're able to do it and they like to do it. For others, they've been in an environment that has been like, oh, I can't wait to be done with this. I've worked so hard. I want to be done with what I'm doing. But in those cases, it's then finding the stimulation and interest and curiosity and newness. What isn't a good setup is to retire and then not have any thoughts about what will fill. It's not just filling your time. It's continuing to grow, because humans are intended to continue to grow. So we understand with children, we push them to do hard things, and we need to continue to do that. And sometimes adult children accidentally make the mistake of saying, oh, let me do everything for you, mom. Let me take this on, instead of encouraging their mom to do for themselves, because doing hard things is a good thing. So I like your question, but it does vary for each person, but requires thought for each person as well as you approach retirement.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And what you are saying, if you are retiring is great, but have a plan. Don't come and retire and say, oh, I'll sit at home for the next 20 years. That's not a good plan. Have a plan, travel, learn Spanish, learn painting, go and volunteer in the food service, whatever. Do something that give you a purpose, correct?
Yes. And the weirder it is, the better. Like finding the unique, weird thing that you're interested in and going for it. And if some people say, well, I'm tired, I work so hard, I just want to put my feet up and relax. Can't I just relax? Absolutely. But in a thoughtful way of understanding what you want this time to look like. And that, sometimes people say, oh, I'm just going to golf. But then you golf for a while and think, oh, actually, I miss these other parts. So having the flexibility to reassess your plan and take downtime to think about it. Because at 65, you may well live 40 more years. So to go into it without a plan really doesn't make sense. And we can't limit ourselves. And my patients who say, I don't know if I could write a book, but I'm kind of interested in doing that. Like, go for it. Dive in and go for it. And don't let the societal pressure that you're less than, because it isn't true. I mean, some of our greatest works are for people later in life who then took this up later.
As a Longevity by Design podcast listener, you understand the value of improving your health for today and for all the years ahead. And if you want to live your healthiest, longest life possible, you need to understand what's going on inside. At Inside Tracker, we take a personalized approach to Healthspan optimization that eliminates guesswork from your wellness plan. Inside Tracker analyzes blood biomarker and DNA data, along with physiomarker data from fitness trackers like Oura Ring, to deliver personalized food, supplement, lifestyle, and exercise recommendations that allow you to take control and improve your health span. And for a limited time, Longevity by Design listeners can get 20% off at the Inside Tracker store. So if you're ready to receive a personal health analysis and data-driven wellness plan to optimize your body for the long haul, then it's time to start Inside. Visit insidetracker.com/podcast to get started today. That's insidetracker.com/podcast to get started today.
That was the first question about the growth. The second one is about community. So is it a correlation? Because there is a say that say, show me your friend and I'll show you who you are. So is it better for someone to try to find younger friends, basically people that are more active, more vivid, or it's okay to go with your peers and when you are 80, have a friend that are 80, when you are 90? What is your view about that?
I love your question, and there is research on that. So what we found, in the same way that you've instructed your daughter to diversify her financial portfolio, it is critical that you diversify your social portfolio. So that means friends that you've had for a long time, yes, keep them. But then the diversification is adding to that portfolio. And often younger friends are a great mix because they're less likely to pass away, and you are really contributing because you're ahead of them. Where people get tripped up on this is that because of ageism or internalized ageism, where you believe that aging is not a good thing, you think you don't have as much to offer, or you think that younger people wouldn't want to be friends with you. And that's dangerous and it's inaccurate. When we step into our aging and go, yeah, I am 82, and people then are like, great. It's only when we make it weird, like, oh, I'm so much older than you. I could be your mother. I could be your grandmother. And that is the shame of the ageism and internalized ageism. So recognize I have a lot to add. And it isn't true when I have these thoughts of like, oh, I'm not as up to date on this part of technology. So what? You have the biggies, and the younger generation needs that. And after all, we're all just humans. So lean into your friendships with younger people. And the way that you make these friendships is by these little micro connections all day, every day. So when you go, let's say, to a coffee shop, do you know the name of the barista that you see on occasion? If you don't, ask her name. And then next time you can say, well, hello, Angela. Then you start talking. You do this enough and you plant all these micro connections, and then you build off of those. And you might say to somebody that you met recently, hey, would you want to grab a coffee? And it maybe would take kissing a few frogs. And then you'll think, gosh, and the people who have friends and have sufficient connection are the ones who are proactively putting in the effort. And when patients come to me and say that they are lonely, nobody calls me, I'm alone all day, I listen carefully and then I say, tell me about how you're reaching out to people. And almost invariably they say, well, I'm not, because nobody's reaching out to me. That's when we have to get creative. Let's think back to somebody that you lost contact with that we can reach out to and send a text, do a call, go on social media, go to your next door neighbor, knock on the door. Hey, I have some lemons in my backyard. I wanted to bring you some lemons. These little connections is what enables people to fortify their social connection and longevity.
Excellent. So we spoke about growth and community. What are the other two?
Yes. So the first was grow. The second is connect. And the third is adapt. So researchers out of Israel have an interesting finding that those who recognize that there will be things in life that they need to adapt to, challenges that they never wished for, and that's a normal part of the human experience. too often I have patients who have worked really hard on their physical bodies, and their approach is, if I simply eat enough protein and exercise and sleep and take these supplements and eat this food, I'm never going to have anything challenging happen to me. I'm just going to outwit aging. That never happens. Stuff happens. I, for example, had my retina detach. I didn't plan on that. I went blind. We're all going to have stuff. That's the norm. And the same thing with our partners. Either our partners are going to pass away before we do, or we're going to pass away before they do. And that's part of the normal part. And to, in advance, recognize that things are going to happen that are going to really surprise me, and I'm going to find a way to work with that thing and to work around it and do things differently. Gosh, I no longer can run because my knee is messed up. What other things are out there? I didn't expect, for example, my husband to pass away in our 60s suddenly. Okay, I'm going to feel the grief. I'm going to be real with it, but I'm also going to think, okay, what will this next part of my life look like in a radically different way? I had an example of adaptation as I was writing the book. So I was reading about how important it is to be able to adapt. And our daughter, who was 25 at the time and in medical school, was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And it was one of those where I had thought that it could happen to me, or it could happen to my husband, or to my 96-year-old mother. But somehow I hadn't factored in that life stuff happens also to our children and even to our grandchildren. And so as I was learning, I thought, you need to practice what you preach and say, yes, this is something that our family, that we're going to walk with, not because we chose it, but because you either have the hard thing and it's suffering, or have the hard thing and still find ways to get to this inner joy that comes often from gratitude and, in this case, adaptation.
Yeah, so what you're saying, make a lemonade from lemon, and that's it. Life is life, and enjoy it.
It's, the alternative is you don't have to. I mean, I have a lot of patients who say, like, no, I am mad that I have, this diagnosis of cancer when I did all these things right. And the rest of my life, I'm going to lament and be pissed off about this. That is a choice. And we can't choose it for somebody else, but it's just when you watch patient after patient suffer so much and you see that there are actual alternatives, you can't help but dig into it and go, how are people, and even going back to Viktor Frankl's work, here he was in a German concentration camp, the worst of the worst of the worst. And what he writes is, I was still able to maintain my spiritual freedom. And that inspires me to think, I'm not saying that it's easy, but is it possible? It is possible. And I know that not only from the research, but watching thousands of people choose that path.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree with you more. And now I'm curious, what is the fourth?
So the last one is my favorite, and that is give. So there is an overwhelming research that people who decide to find a way to continue to give of themselves age in a way that not only correlates with living longer lives, with living healthier lives, but also experiencing more well-being, or what I call Joyspan. There was research out of UCLA by a professor named Stephen Cole, who was he was looking at the epigenetics. So you can think of genes can be like a piano key. And the question is are you going to press down on the key of the gene to be expressed? And so his research really was looking at inflammation, which is such an important part of aging, and also antiviral load. And he put all these variables in that you would expect, but also added one that was purpose, asking participants, to what extent do you feel like you have purpose in your life? And he was so surprised by how robust a finding, with all variables held constant, it was for people to feel that they had purpose. And with purpose, we need to make sure that we're understanding what we're talking about. It's not, I'm curing cancer, I'm eradicating the problem of poverty. It's little purpose of saying, there is something with me that I am able to share with somebody else. And that could be with your next door neighbor who has 4 children and is a single mother. And at dinner time, she's very overwhelmed. And maybe you go next door and offer, like, would it be helpful for me to watch any of the babies while you're cooking dinner? When it works, right? Like when she goes, oh my gosh, yes, that is my wish. Could you? Thank you. Talk about a win-win. And humans are designed to give, and the giving helps not only the recipient, but equally, if not more so, the person who is giving.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that it's beautiful that you came with those 4 guiding principles. And can you provide like an example of what an average older adult can do in those regards? Like a couple of examples like that?
I would love to. So this is a story that my friend not only allowed me to share, but he encouraged me to do so. And he has since passed away, and I'm just so grateful for his generosity. So his name was Harry, and he said, use my real name. And Harry he attended Stanford University. He had been a Green Beret. He was very successful in business. He had a long marriage. His wife, in their late 70s, developed Alzheimer's disease, and he cared for his wife until her passing, when she was 80. Then after that, he then had some opportunity to think, now what? As many of us do as caregivers, it can be quite consuming, and he wasn't sure of sort of what the next step was. Around that time, people saw his vulnerability at being a man alone in his nice house without his wife. And people started calling on the phone and saying, oh, we really need your help to support this nonprofit organization. Well, it turns out they were all scam artists. And not only was it strangers, but it was also somebody that really weaseled in, and he thought that they were dating. And basically, over the course of 16 months, he lost over $600,000, and he lost his home. And that's when I met him, when I was doing work in elder abuse and financial exploitation. So the day I met him, was in a hospital suffering dehydration and malnutrition, because once he realized that he had been taken for his life savings, he obviously, like as we would, he felt awful and stopped eating and drinking. And the medical community only saw those medical, like, oh, dehydration, malnutrition. But in digging into it, we saw what was behind it. So the question was, could somebody who has endured all of this get back on a path of enjoying their longevity? And the answer was yes. So Harry, he did lose his home, but he was able to move into a not very nice looking, but full of love community, got to know some new friends. He took back up some calligraphy writing that he had done as a young man. He then started kind of a business of selling these beautiful greeting cards. He then took up a guitar. He volunteered at this equestrian riding center in California called the Shea Center. And watching him piece together this new life as a result of a decision to live this remaining time was such an illustrative example of it isn't too late. And if you decide that you want to use your longevity and you want to maximize the quality of your life, you absolutely can take action steps in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's I'm calling it make lemonade from lemon. You have a tough time. Everyone have a tough time. His tough time looks a bit bigger than average, but still try to look at the half full of the cup and don't stare on the half empty. And if you'll do that, and you'll find, as I said, the hobby and the friendship and a meaning to live, and maybe that's what you call joy.
And that's
Then
right. And the thing is, the result is the same. So when I teach
yeah,
undergraduate students at the university, I start with a pie chart behind me, behind the lectern, and it's a big red circle. And I say, let's start with the mortality rate. And the circle is all filled in 100%. So we are definitely all going to die. That is one thing that we know for sure. And it will be either suffer a lot and then die, or find a way not to suffer and then die. And the
yeah,
choice is yours. And when people say, well, easy for you to say, but this, but that, but all the other things that people carry, I've gotten a little callous over the years, because when you have the privilege of walking with thousands of people and watch how they've done, and watch that we do have, even in the toughest circumstances, we still have some agency in how we respond.
yeah, no, absolutely. You also been a strong voice for older adults. So, how do cultural narratives about aging shape our experience of it?
It's huge so when we were little, we were told these fairy tales of the old witch comes in and she's got a big, terrible, ugly wart on her nose. And then Hansel and Gretel, then she tiptoes and then she's going to try to eat them, right? Like, we have planted the seed that old is ugly and bad and awful. And that's really dangerous, and it's a lot to carry, and we're all carrying it. And so I can say, even as a gerontologist who thinks about this a lot, I still struggle with these things. So if I have, for example, a lot of lines on my neck when I'm looking at my cell phone, I think, oh no. And then I think, who said, oh no? Who cares? That's what necks do over time. That they bend like that, and they get a lot of lines on them because they've bent. And that is not a bad thing. It is not ugly. It is not a failing. So I think a lot of times we need to catch ourselves. For example, you forget where you parked your car, and you can go, oh, I'm really having a senior moment. I'm really losing it. Oh gosh. And you're like reinforcing that. Or when you catch yourself starting to go there, you can counter that, cognitive behavioral therapy of saying to yourself, everybody forgets stuff sometimes at every age. That's not a big deal. It is not the beginning of the end. And, like reforming how we talk to ourselves, because this thing of like, I can't get old is toxic. And so the
Yeah,
question is not how not to age. The question is how to age with vitality, with intellectual curiosity, with humility and love and hope. Because how not to age, you are going to age. And so often as a gerontologist, I'll be out somewhere and a guy will come up to me and he'll say, you'll never guess how old I am. Because he wants me to think he's far younger than he looks, than he is, because he feels like he looks younger because he exercises and does all the things. But I never think that. I in my mind, I think, yeah, you're 82. So like, the idea that we're somehow fooling the system that you is, no, be a fabulous 82 and lean into it and be fit and strong and whatever, but you don't got to try to be anything different than what you are now. And I think if we were to step into the age that we are now, we would start to change the narrative around aging so that people no longer think that it's a bad thing, because it isn't.
yeah, no, makes sense. So, what change in policy or healthcare do you believe would best support Joyspan at a scale?
I love that you asked that, because what we've been talking a lot about is individual choices, but that's only part of the equation. The societal, like whether we, for example, have funding to support the care needs and the research needs. So as a society, we need to also step into that and say, if we're going to maximize our ability as a nation to maximize our lifespan, health span, and joy span, we need to stop denying that it's happening, stop framing it as all decline, and start really thinking about solutions. For example, I am very much in favor of intergenerational solutions. So I've been involved in some work that combines a care center, so people with high needs who are older adults, with a child center. And so we have children and older people working together where everyone benefits. At the same center, they also had some housing for college students who, they really needed the cheap or free place to stay.
Yeah.
So I think separating populations out by age, in my experience, hasn't been the greatest solution. I think generations and different ages benefit from being together. So I think as a society, coming up with solutions that are not age segregating are particularly promising.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense. I know that in the blue zone, for example, the older generation are usually live in the same house. So you have the grandfather and the grandfather and the father and the kids, and they are together all the time. And then maybe it's a help with the connection, but it's help also with a lot of other things. So it makes sense. What else would you recommend us to do in order to build the Joyspan as a movement and help people stay with the purpose and so on? What else can society do?
Yes. So when we're looking at, there are many of the people that I've had the privilege of working on who financially were trying to make a decision between paying for food and paying for needed medication. So I think it's really important to look at the social determinants of health as well and recognize that it is critical that we think through the economics of being older so that people are saving for these long lives because they're recognizing that it is likely that we will have long lives. I think part of the denial of aging is thinking, oh, well, I'm not going to think about that. Like, I'm just not going to think about being older, but instead to think about you're likely to be older. And when you are older, you will likely need some care arrangement. And that, often takes societal safeguards and also, if we can, our financial savings for that time. So it's important that we are frugal and cognizant about saving enough money that will last us our whole life long, because that gives us a lot of freedom as opposed to like not having enough money for old age.
Yeah, which is devastating. And I think that a lot of the poor people are actually elderly because, as you said, the average American maybe have I don't know $20,000 in their 401k, and if they would live another 40 years, so they have $500 per year. That's not enough to
It's
live.
not. It's
Yeah.
not. And that's why a lot of these components of Joyspan not only impact, the length of your life, your health, and your well-being, but they can be good. So I have some patients who are from socioeconomic status that is very disadvantaged, and they have then teamed up with friends who they're living together. So I have a group of ladies who nobody could afford their care or housing, and now they're living in one of the ladies' houses because it's paid off. They all pay her some rent. They're living together, and then when a caregiver comes in, there's some economies of scale. So that connection and that adaptation, and then even that growth and giving, right? So with those ladies, we're thinking about, oh, wow, look at you. You are a fantastic cook and you like cooking. What if we found a way that you are the you are the spearheading the cooking part of it. You over there, you're really good at this part of it. So those staying engaged benefits not only you, but also these more complex arrangements of later life.
Yeah, so we can be creative even when you are old and try to find a solution. And again, it's going back to your four building block of Joyspan. Be creative. I'm sure that it's part of it. So I have a few quick questions to ask you. What is your favorite longevity habit?
Well, I can tell you that I have a mother who is 96, and she has practiced what I've preached in terms of when I would find something in the literature that was shown in the literature to be effective, I would adopt it. And I'm only 56, but I would also have my mother adopt it. And so on Instagram, I share her because she's 96 years old, living independently, perfectly cognitively sharp and connected and doing all these things. And she works on all four of these every day. But one of the practices that she does is every single morning she takes out a blank journal and she calls it her gratitude journal. And it sounds so simple, but she just writes all the things that she's grateful for and she keeps it. And so now she's at about 580 entries in this book.
Wow.
And she's reinforcing that which remains. Like, I am grateful to have a comfortable bed. Oh my goodness, I can see a tree out the window. I'm looking forward to a call with my grandson. And you're reinforcing what you see. Because unfortunately, with too many of my patients, when you open your eyes, you start thinking, oh, the opposite, right? You're going, oh, my lower back hurts. I gotta address that thing that I hate doing. Oh man, and so we're reinforcing those things. So it is not Pollyanna, and it is not just nicey nice to do these things that actually change the quality of your long life.
Yeah, and that's actually a very cool idea. We are actually been programmed to be negative. Like think about when you go to a restaurant, you will rarely say, "Oh, this waitress was great." But if the waitress was bad, you will go to the manager and say, "This was a bad waitress." So basically, and maybe that's part of the Joyspan is try to be more positive than negative. And maybe when you are positive all the time, your life will be positive. When you're negative all the time, your life will be negative.
Guaranteed. And that's what the science says. So in the book Joyspan, I put the proven practices that I call joy practices in that people can give it a go and try it. And sometimes even skeptics will say, I had someone I was working with and he had 2 PhDs, he'd done all these things and he was just miserable in his late 70s. And I said, what if you just try it? And he's like, oh, okay, I'll just try this. And he said, my goodness, some of these small practices, and it's the same way you wouldn't think, oh, just going on a walk is going to help with my cardiovascular health. Absolutely going on a walk helps. It is all these little things that add up to your health and your emotional health. There's no biggies. They're all little.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of which, what is one daily joy practice that you never skip?
A joy practice that I never skip is there's a practice that we call future you. And so it is a practice of imagining the best possible future you. Because if we don't think about what the older version of ourselves is, or even worse, if we imagine a very awful version of ourselves, we subconsciously are working toward becoming that. So something that I do is that I picture in my mind 95-year-old Kerry and how she would be enjoying her garden and teaching and still active as a professor at the university. I picture about what I would be wearing and where I would be living. And sometimes I imagine it, that my darling husband is still with me. And sometimes I imagine, that maybe he has already passed away because men don't live as long. But to picture, and if I meet somebody inspirational, which I do, then I'll add that in like, oh my gosh, look at that person. Look what they're growing their own vegetables. I'll add that into my picture. So it's what is that best possible older you?
Yeah. No, that's great. And a follow-up question: if the listener can take away just one message from Joyspan, what should it be?
The one message is that our current approach to longevity is half-baked. This thought that it's all just physical doesn't account for the whole. So while I want you to continue with these great physical health habits, to sleep enough, to go to get your physicals, to eat real food, to move your body, to keep your strength, to keep your agility and flexibility, I equally would implore you to work on these internal fortifications that's going to enable you to have the strength that it takes to live a 122-year life.
Yeah, I'll say amen. And thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your wisdom. I really appreciate it. And for our listener who want to learn more, you can find a Joyspan, I assume, in any bookstore or Amazon and all of those. And if you want to learn more on Dr. Bernheit work, you can go to our website, which is drkerryburnheit.com, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And you can buy the book anywhere, and it's on Audible, and I do the reading if you're a person who prefers that. And because there are practices in the book, you can write, you don't need a separate workbook. There are some, for all authors these days, people are making AI workbooks that are not affiliated with you at all. So I want to tell people, when you buy the book, it includes the workbook right inside of it, and you don't need to buy any extra workbook because it's not really the real workbook anyway.
That's excellent. And for our audience, if you enjoyed today's episode of Longevity by Design, please like and follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Leave us a rating and review. If it's really help others discover this conversation. And of course, share this episode with anyone passionate about longevity and healthy living. And thank you again for turning into Longevity by Design. And it's produced by InstaTracker, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much, Kerry. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Gil.
Thanks for listening to Longevity by Design. Please subscribe to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. Longevity by Design is powered by InsideTracker, a personalized health optimization platform that helps people improve their lives by improving their bodies from the inside out, using personalized, science-backed recommendations for nutrition, supplements, and lifestyle changes. To learn more, visit insidetracker.com/podcast.